What was the need for that diabolical cliffhanger? I am an absolute fiend for hockey romance. Hello and welcome back to the channel. It is finally that time of year when Spotify Wrapped is out, Apple Music Replay, YouTube Replay, whatever the other platforms have, and everybody's doing their reading wrapped, and I have never had the opportunity to do one of my own. This is my second full year of being as voracious of a reader as I am currently, and I did film one of these last year, but I got cold feet and I never posted it. However, today we are going to be going through the 111 books that I have read in 2025 as per the 25th of December, today. But I am currently reading Misfits Like Us, and I think by the time the year is properly over, I will be done with Misfits Like Us, Nobody Like Us, and Unlucky Like Us, which are the last 3 books in the Like Us series. This might be a long one, just saying. So grab something to drink. I have my iced tea. Grab something to eat, and let's talk about all the books that I read this year. Before we get on with the video, as always, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss every time I post a new video. Let's go. So, starting in January, I read 9 books, and I started with the Addicted series. I started with Kiss the Sky. 2025, by the way, was very much the year of the Kindle. I remembered I had a Kindle, and I remembered it had a charger, and I read so many goddamn books on that thing. It was insane. If you look at the amount of books I read physically last year and the amount of books I read physically this year, it's kind of sad how the number has decreased. But that's besides the point. I started with Kiss the Sky, and I had put off reading this book for a while. But then when I read it, I deeply regretted putting the book off because Connor turned out to be one of my favorite book boyfriends ever. Kobalaway as a couple are definitely up there with my top couples. So definitely a series that I recommend reading. I gave it 4 stars. And then I read Hothouse Flower, which is the next book in the Addicted Calloway series. It follows Daisy and Reich. It's their first book. And I was a little bit, I don't have a word for it, cautious going into this book because they do have an age difference, and she was a minor when they met, and I was like, oh, but I did end up really liking the book. I also gave that 4 stars. Then you have Thrive, which was the 3rd book I read in Jan. I gave it 4 stars as well. It is the events of Kiss the Sky and Hothouse Flower, but from Lily and Lo's perspective. I loved it. It felt like coming home. It felt like a warm hug. Then I read Addicted After All, which is Lily and Lo's. It's a continuation of their story. It's their last book. I genuinely is one of my favorite books in that whole series. The Addicted Calloway series as a whole will always be a 5-star read for me. I will always recommend it, and I loved it so much. Then I read Feel the Fire and Long Way Down, which are Rose and Connor and Daisy and Reich's second books, the continuation of their stories, and they were also both 4 stars for me. I took a break after Long Way Down to read Onyx Storm. It had, I read it on release day when it came out. Thankfully they shipped out my order at the right time and it came on release day. And I read it in 24 hours and it left me in the biggest fantasy slump. It was so bad. It was so bad. If you've read this book, please hit me up because it's been nearly a year and I fear I can still feel the hangover. Rebecca Yarros, if somehow you're watching this, what was the need for that diabolical cliffhanger? it made me sick. I felt sick for days after I finished this book. It was absolutely insane and completely unwarranted. After I finished Onyx Storm, I read Some Kind of Perfect, which is the epilogue novel in the Addicted series. I gave that also 4 stars. And then I read When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. And like I said, I had just finished Onyx Storm and I was still like having the biggest book hangover ever, and I think it ruined a lot of the fantasy that I read afterwards. I gave this book 3 stars, and it sort of felt like rip-off Stelena Sardothien met Cassian from Akotar if he had a dragon. But I will admit the world building was fascinating. It was unlike anything I've ever read before in a fantasy book. And I am looking forward to reading the sequel. It's coming out next year. It's called The Ballad of Falling Dragons. Not a bad book. I think just the fact that I'd read Onyx Storm before it kind of ruined the book for me. Now we are moving on to February. And I started February very strong off with my second 5-star read of the year, and that is none other than Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Now, I know you're technically supposed to read Caraval before this. I read the first Caraval book and I liked it. Like, I really did like it. Scarlett and Julian, love them. I DNF'd Legendary because I just found the POV switch from Scarlett to Tella. Like, I couldn't do it. You know, I found her mildly infuriating, and so I never finished Legendary. And so I had like little to no context as to like Jax's backstory, because I barely got to the part where he was introduced in the Caraval series. But I feel like it is not necessary to read Caraval because Stephanie Garber sets this up as like a whole separate story. The only things that, you know, overlap are Jax. 5 stars, solid 5 stars. Holy Jax. It felt really whimsical. Even on my Onyx Storm hangover couldn't remove the 5-star rating on this book. If you know anything about me, you know that I am an absolute fiend for hockey romance. And I've become an absolute fiend for hockey in general, but hockey romance is like... So, I read my first interconnected standalone hockey romance series of the year in Feb, and that was the Seattle Scorpions series by Ruth Stilling. Ruth Stilling is one of my favorite hockey romance authors. I love her. I love her world. I love her writing so much. I love her MCs. They send me into bi panic every single time. The first book is Boarded Hearts. It follows John and Felicity. He is like the playboy and she's a single mom. The second book is Frozen Over. It follows Zach and Luna. It's like childhood friends to lovers, and he basically goes back to his hometown after an injury to like sort of rest and recuperate. The third one, Dead Drinker, is one of my favorite books of all time. Highly recommend. I dish this out to everybody who asks me for a book recommendation. I actually read it twice this year. Once as an ebook and once as an audiobook. And the fourth one is Ruled Out, follows Jesse and Mia. It's like Second Chance. She's the daughter of another team's GM. After I finished Seattle Scorpions, I went back to the Magnificent North and I read The Ballad of Never After. I read this book in one sitting. Okay, I sat there for 3 hours dedicatedly in the middle of exam season and finished this book. Solid 5 stars. It was an absolute emotional roller coaster. If you know, you know. You know, just like the last 100 pages, you go from one end of the spectrum to the absolute other end of the spectrum. And then in the same day, I sat dedicatedly for the next 3 hours and read this book because I, couldn't wait. The cliffhanger was diabolical. And this was also 5 stars, but I liked this book so much better than this book. I feel like the end was sort of unsatisfying. But then also I understand, because how do you top this book? I read If You Could See the Sun by Anne Liang, and it was my first Anne Liang book. It was very sweet. The plot is very interesting actually. It follows Alice, and she discovers one day that she can turn invisible. And so she goes to Henry, who's her academic rival, and together they create this app called Beijing Ghost, where she, helps other students at her school out, but they don't know that it's her because she's just turning invisible and doing all of this. Then I read I Hope This Doesn't Find You, also by Anne Liang, and this one is also academic rivals to lovers. This one follows Sadie Wen and Julius Gong, and Sadie writes these hate emails, but she keeps them all in her drafts. And one day, those hate emails accidentally get sent out to everybody she wrote them to, and she sent like a lot of them to Julius, and it follows like the aftermath, the repercussions of those emails. I read another Anne Liang book. I read This Time It's Real. This one follows Kaz Song and Eliza Lynn, and he is an actor, and she wrote an essay about falling in love, and that essay went completely viral on the internet. And so she went to Kaz and proposed like a fake dating arrangement, because that essay was completely fabricated, right? The love one. Moving on to my favorite month of the year, and it's totally not biased because my birthday is in March, but in March I read 7 books. And I think I had a pretty good reading month in March, actually, in terms of ratings. Like, I really enjoyed the books that I read. We started off very, very strong with Nightshade by Autumn Woods. This was a very solid 5-star read for me. This is book one in a duology. So, if you do not like cliffhangers, I would suggest waiting until July when Daybreak comes out to read this, because it has an absolutely diabolical cliffhanger. Ophelia, the main character, goes to this creepy Scottish university called Sorosong University to investigate the death of her parents. And while at Sorosong University, she meets Alex Corbo Green, also known as the love of my life. And he is the son of the man that she thinks killed her parents. It's so good. The banter is absolutely incredible. Then I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold. It's like a series of short stories set in this cafe where you can travel back in time. And the concept is really cool. I feel like the execution could have been better. I gave it 2.5 stars just because the ending pissed me off. Then I read yet another 5-star. This is Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher. I don't know if you can tell, but I am a very easily pleased reader. I hand out 5 stars very easily. But I feel like that's also because I pick up books that I know I'm going to enjoy. Love Unwritten is book 2 in the Lakefront Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. It follows Ellie Sinclair, who is the nanny to this famous billionaire, Rafael Lopez. They go on this like trip with his son, but they go to like Hawaii or something. And you know, again, if you know anything about me, you know that I am also a fiend for single dad nanny romances. Um, this book does have mental health rep in it, and I absolutely love when books have mental health rep in them and authors are not afraid to talk about topics that are socially stigmatized. And I feel like it was executed very well, because I've read books in which like the mental health rep was disgusting, it was horrible. It was very well done, and as someone who has lived through the experiences that Ellie has lived through, it I like it I was very touched. It was, I did not read the trigger warnings, but you should always read your trigger warnings. So naturally, as one does, I went on a Lauren Asher kick and I picked up her Dirty Air series. This is a set of 4 interconnected Formula One romance standalone books. And I love Formula One. I am a Ferrari fan, personally. And I've always found that I can't read F1 romances because they're wildly inaccurate. I didn't have a problem with these ones, okay? Just the thing is, all the drivers felt like inserts for actual drivers. Like it felt like this was a book about Charles Leclerc and this was a book about Nico Rosberg. I did like it. I gave it 3 stars. This book follows Noah Slade and he is world champion, and he, starts this romance up with his rival's little sister. It's like Grumpy Sunshine, rival's younger sister. Then I read the second book in the Dirty Air series. This is Collided. Like I said, this felt like a Nico Rosberg inspired romance. It follows Liam Zander, who is a German driver, and he starts up a romance with the rival team principal's daughter. I gave it 4 stars. It was better than Throttled. I liked it. I liked Liam. He was very sweet. I liked Sophie as well. And then I read White Nights by Dostoevsky. I was gifted this for my birthday. I didn't like it. I gave it 2 stars. I feel like people hype it up to be more than it is, and I just went in thinking so much and came out disappointed. And for the 7th and final book that I read in March, I read Lights Out by Navessa Allen. If you've read this book, you know just how fun it is, okay? And I absolutely devoured it. Like, I read it in like 6 hours. It was so funny. It's like a dark rom-com, okay? Like, it follows Josh and Allie. And Allie is a nurse. She's a trauma nurse. And Josh is, he is the son of a serial killer, but he's one of those faceless, like, masked content creators. And Allie follows him, and he starts stalking her. And it is genuinely one of the funniest things I have ever read. I would highly recommend. There is one more book in that series out right now. I think it's called Caught Up. I haven't read that yet. And there is a third one coming out called Game On, which I am looking forward to. So, let's go to April. I read 9 books in April, and it wasn't a bad month for me, actually. Again, the Kindle was like the love of my life during this month. I started with Perfect Deek by Ruth Stilling, and it is the first book in a spin-off series to the Seattle Scorpions called The Blade Kings, and I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. It follows Jack Morgan, who is the son of Felicity from Boarded Hearts, and Jack basically, like, it follows the start of his pro career in New York, and the trope is like rival's ex-girlfriend, which I went straight from the land of fun hockey romance to emotional damage times infinity by reading Sunrise on the Reaping. I bought this book for my birthday, and I genuinely don't think I've cried harder reading a book than I did reading this book. I knew it was gonna be hard. I underestimated just how hard it would be. I gave it 4 stars, and it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating, and I know the movie is going to rip my soul out next year. But the casting directors cooked. The epilogue, put my heart back together after the rest of the book crushed it and stomped on it and then ran over it with a semi. After Sunrise on the Reaping, I read the 3rd book in the Powerless trilogy, Fearless. This is, by the way, one of the prettiest books that I own. Number 1, just look at that foiling on the book. It is absolutely gorgeous. There's a crown, and then on the back it says, "Forever My Undoing." Why is a book this bad so pretty? Powerless wasn't bad. And then Reckless Guy became more irritating. He just kept repeating the same thing over and over again, Fearless, what? It literally felt like Catching Fire. If Powerless was the Hunger Games, this was Catching Fire. Then I read went back to my hockey romance and I read The Chase by L. Kennedy. That is book one in the Briar U series, and I read off campus like last year. And then I just never got around to reading the rest of L. Kennedy's hockey romance books. This first book follows Summer De Laurentiis. She's Dean's sister, and Colin Fitzgerald, or Fitzy. And I genuinely don't remember the plot. I think they were roommates and something happened. It was bloody hilarious. I love Summer. I love Fitz. Then I read Games Untold by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This book, there are 8 short stories and they each follow like a different set of characters. I think my favorite out of all of them was The Same Backward as Forward. I am terrified to read the story from Toby's POV because Hannah's POV made me sob, and I am not ready for this universe to be over. As much as we all say she's milking the universe by releasing more books over and over again, I love this universe and I don't think I'm ready for it to come to an end. Then I read the first 3 books in the Rose Hill series by Elsie Silver. The first book, Wild Love, follows Ford, who is Willa's brother, and Rosie. Rosie is his best friend's younger sister. Ford is running like a music label and he needs an assistant, and so she becomes his assistant. All the books in this series deal with like the MMCs being some kind of father/father figure, and in Ford's case, he basically donated his sperm to this bank, so he has a biological daughter, and this daughter shows up at his doorstep one day and is like, my dad died and my mom is like really depressed, will you be my legal guardian for a while? And he's like, yeah, sure. Definitely my favorite book in the series. Then I read Wild Eyes, which is the second book in that series, and it follows Weston Belmont, who is Rosie's older brother, and Skylar Stone. And Skylar is like a famous country singer. She comes to like Ford's label to like work with him, and she's sort of very burnt out. She was raised in a very like toxic environment where her father is her manager and he was very abusive. West is a single dad to 2 kids. He co-parents with his ex-wife. It was very refreshing to see like a co-parenting relationship that was healthy. I gave it 3 stars. I feel like the execution could have been better when it came to West, because Weston in every book except his is like, then the third book in that series is called Wild Side, and it follows Reese, who is a professional wrestler, and Tabby. Tabby's sister dies and she leaves custody of her son with Reese. So they get into like a marriage of convenience so they can both raise Milo. The last book I read this month was yet another 5-star read. I read The Risk by L. Kennedy. Jake Connolly is like the love of my life. Okay, so it follows Jake and Brenna, and she's the coach's daughter and he is the captain of the rival hockey team. We have moved on to May. I kind of sort of lost it in May. I think I read about 20 books. And what is really funny is that I had finals, and the month that I read the most books in is the month that I had all my exams in. So started off with The Play by Al Kennedy. That's book 3 in the Briar U series. It follows Demi and Hunter. I will be completely honest with you, I do not remember a single thing that happened in this book. I gave it 3 stars, but it was genuinely kind of forgettable. Then I read Total Shutdown, which is the second book in the Blade King series by Ruth Stilling. 4 stars. It follows Sawyer Price and Collins McKenzie. He is like the single dad captain of the hockey team, and she is like the biker girl. Then I read The Dare. Again, I do not remember a single thing that happened in this book. Then I read all 3 books in the Campus Diaries series. So that's The Graham Effect, The Dixon Rule, The Charlie Method, and they follow, respectively, Gigi Graham and Luke Ryder, Shane Lindley and Anna Dixon, and Charlotte Kingston, Beckett Dunn, and Will Larson. They were fine. I really liked the first 2. The third one was... I read The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer. Now, I did attempt to read the other books in this series and DNF'd all of them except this one. It follows Hazel and Rory. Then we have my first 5-star of the month, King of Envy by Anna Huang. I thought nobody could beat Xavier, I don't know. The guy from King of Sloth, okay? Then Vuk Markovic showed up and said, hold my beer. Then I read yet another 5-star, back-to-back 5 stars, Watch Me by Tahir Mafi. This is the first book in the Shatter Me second gen spin-off, New Rebellion, New Resistance, whatever it's called. James Anderson is mine. Then I read The Reprints of Rachel Price. I gave this 4 stars. It was definitely very slow for the first half, but the second half had me like hooked, like had me gagged. I was just, the plot twists are insane. Definitely worth the read. Love Holly Jackson's writing. Then I read Windy City. I love this series. This is one of my top tier found family sports romance series. There are 5 books in total, and they each follow a different couple. So you have Stevie and Xanders, Ryan and Indy, Kai Miller, Isaiah Kennedy, and Rio and Hallie. They are hockey romance, basketball romance, baseball, and hockey. Caught Up was my favorite. The Right Move was not very far behind, and I haven't rated a single book in this series under 4 stars. Then I read Painted Scars by Niva Artaj. It is the first book in the Perfectly Imperfect series. I didn't like it. It felt like the entire book was written by character AI. Then, for some reason, I picked up the second book in that series. I read Broken Whispers, and I liked this one more. Then I read Releasing 10 by Chloe Walsh. This book, I genuinely like trauma blocked half of it, okay? I do not remember what happened. I gave it 3 stars, okay? This book made me like Huey Biggs. Then I read the third book in the Perfectly Imperfect series called Hidden Truths. And the 20th and final book I read in May was Collide by Balcabra. This book is like college hockey. It follows Aiden and Summer, and he is the captain of the hockey team. You know, they have to spend a lot of time together because they're doing this project together. Let's move on to June. I read 12 books in June, and I started off with an audio re-listen of Dead Rinker, and then I read the sequel to Collide. This is Spiral, also by Balcabra. I liked this book more. This, I think, is my favorite book in the entire series. This one follows Eli and Sage, and he is a rookie in the NHL now. And, you know, he's got all these like rumors about him and all of that. And she is somehow related to the GM of his team. It's so good. They start fake dating. Then I read one of my favorite reads of the year. This is Great Big Beautiful Life. It had me in a chokehold, okay? I could not get up once I started reading. Think The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It has sort of like a similar premise with Alice, the main character, going to this island to talk to this, you know, reclusive heiress called Margaret Ives. And she's going there to, you know, like interview her so they can write a biography. And she finds out that she is not the only one who is, you know, writing this biography, because Margaret has called Pulitzer Prize winning author Hayden, what's his name? Hayden Anderson, I think it is. Margaret starts feeding both of them separate parts of the same story, but they can't tell each other because they've both got ironclad NDAs. And you don't get Hayden's POV, you only get Alice's POV, so you only know what Margaret is telling Alice. And, you know, you watch her piece together the entire story, and it's insane. It is absolutely insane. Infinity Stars, if I could give a book Infinity Stars. It is so good. Going back into like fantasy for a bit, I read Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. It follows Evie Sage, who is like a girl who is looking for a job, and she runs into this guy called the Villain in a forest, and he's like, you know, I need an assistant, why don't you come work for me? And so she starts working for the Villain, so she's the assistant to the Villain. And I read Say You'll Remember Me. I remember one thing from this book, and that is in the first 3 chapters, the male main character was compared to Rhysand from ACOTAR like 5 times. It wasn't bad, it was just all the Rhysanding kind of threw me off a little bit. Then I read a series that I deeply regret reading, and I didn't even finish it, okay? I read the first 3. The Beasts of the Briar series by Elizabeth Helen. It just kept getting more and more ridiculous. I finished off June with one of my favorite series, of the year, the DC Star series. So Face Off, Power Play, Slapshot, and Hat Trick, and they were 4 4 4 5. Moving on to July. In July, I read 6 books, mostly because I was out on a trip like half the month and I didn't have time to read. But I read Shots Fired, 5 stars, by Ruth Stilling. Book 3 in the Blade King series follows Darcy and Archer. Then I read Enigma by Runix, and this follows Kaz and Salem. And she goes to this like university to find out what happened to her older sister who died. Then I read Magnolia Parks, and I will admit that I found BJ Ballantyne absolutely insufferable in the first book. I also did not like Magnolia Parks that much in the first book. So then I read this absolute traumatizing. What do I even say about this book? Okay, I gave it 5 stars. I read it on the plane back from London and I could not stop crying, okay? I haven't seen this show because I'm not ready to put myself through that again. Then I read Daisy Hates, and I liked it more than Magnolia Parks just because we get Julian's POV. And then I read The X-Files by Jessa Joyce. They are exes and they're going to this like farm to try and save their mutual best friend's wedding. It's time for August. I read 8 books in August. Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. I gave this one also 3 stars. It wasn't the best. Daisy Hates, The Great Undoing. I gave that 3 stars as well. I listened to Offside by Avery Keelan. Only took me 2 months. I gave that 3 stars. Then I read Magnolia Parks, Into the Dark. Traumatizing, but also just like absolutely incredible, okay? I grew to love Magnolia. Okay, when I tell you I despised that woman at the start of the first book and how much I love her at the end of this book, you think I'm crazy. Okay. Then I read Apprentice to the Villain. This is book 2 in the Assistant to the Villain series. And Evie Sage just becomes so unhinged in this one. Went back to my hockey romance roots again, and I read Unsteady and Unloved by Peyton Curran, and I gave them 4 and 5 stars respectively. The first one follows Reese and Sadie, and he is a hockey player who is experiencing panic attacks on the ice after a really bad hit. And she's a figure skater who is just trying to provide for her 2 little brothers because her dad is like an alcoholic. Loved Unsteady, but Unloved will always have my heart. It follows Rue and Matt. And the last book I read in August was City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. It did take me a year and a half after I read City of Bones to read City of Ashes. All of these tabs are just Jace's dry humor. It's September. We've reached September. In September, I read 5 books. So the reading slump was hitting. I read Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. I got this when I went to London. I devoured it. It follows Bo and Win. Continuing on with that series, I read Out of the Woods, and it follows Bo and Win's friends, Sarah and Caleb. And it's marriage in crisis. They go on this like wilderness retreat to like get to know each other again. Then I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is my first V.E. Schwab book. It took me a while. The concept again intrigued me very much, and I did like the book. I just think the execution of the concept again could have been better. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of the magical realism, I think is what it's called. I think that's the case with a lot of books in that genre, is that the concepts are amazing, but they're not translated well enough through the execution. Then I read Consider Me by Becca Mack. This is the first book in the Playing for Keeps series. It follows Carter and Olivia, and he's like the obnoxious playboy, and she's a gym teacher. But he's obnoxious in a way that's endearing. And the last book I read in September was Fake Skating by Lynn Painter, 5 stars, no remarks. This book is hands down my favorite Lynn Painter book I have ever read. I am the president of the Alec Barzewski fan club. I run the Alec Barzewski fan club. So, In all of October, I read one book physically. I read 9 books in total, but only one book physically. I started with the next 3 books in the Playing for Keeps series: Play With Me, Unravel Me, and Fall With Me. I don't think I have ever identified with a character as much as I identify with Jackson Riley. I relate to him on a level that's mildly unhealthy. Then I read the Edge of Darkness trilogy by Lee Rivers. So that's Insatiable, Voracious, and Restitution. Follows Kate Mitchell and Stacey Rhodes. If you want to read this, again, check your trigger warnings. The story is absolutely insane. My third 5-star read of this month was Mate by Ali Hazelwood. Then I read Love on the Brain, also by Ali Hazelwood, and I do have the paperback, but it's currently with a friend, so I cannot show it to you. Then I read Full Tilt by Ruth Stilling, which is the 4th book in the Blade King series, in November. I had 2 genres that I read. It was either hockey, romance, MM, or both, because I started with Heated Rivalry, and I read, very ironically, I read Heated Rivalry and The Long Game before I knew there was going to be a show. And so I read both of them for shits and giggles. And then, Ilya and Shane are like deeply rooted in my soul. I gave them 3 and 4 stars, Heated Rivalry and The Long Game. And then I read this emotional roller coaster of a book, and you've probably heard me talk about it. This is Breathe With Me by Becca Mack. It is the last book in the Playing for Keeps series. It is the only one that I have physically, but it was just gut-wrenching in the best way possible. Then I read Revolve by Bal Cabra. This is the 3rd book in the Off the Ice series, the first 2 being Collide and Spiral. This follows Dylan and Sierra. Sierra is a figure skater who, hasn't found her groove yet. She fell on the ice and had a pretty bad, injury. And Dylan got kicked off his hockey team for doing drugs. They pair up and they start figure skating together. Then I read First Time Caller, and I think this is actually the last book this year that I've read physically, because after that my Kindle was working overtime, okay? This follows Lucy and Aiden, and he is the host of Baltimore's romance hotline called Heartstrings. Her daughter calls him up one day to ask for advice, and the clip of that goes completely viral. I read The Bad Reputation duet by Krista and Becca Ritchie. I started the year off with Krista and Becca Ritchie, and I'm going to finish the year off with Krista and Becca Ritchie. The Bad Reputation duet follows Willow and Garrison. It felt like coming home to a universe that I hadn't read in a year. Then I read the first 3 books in the Like Us series by Krista and Becca Ritchie. So that is Damaged Like Us, Lovers Like Us, and Alphas Like Us, and they all follow Maximoff Hale and Pharaoh Keene. It is a bodyguard romance. We're in December. All of December, I have basically only been reading the Like Us series. So I read Tangled Like Us and Sinful Like Us, which follow Jane Cobalt and Thatcher Moretti. Then Headstrong Like Us goes back to Maximoff and Pharaoh, 4 stars. Charming Like Us is Oscar Oliveira and Jack Hyland. And then I read Wild Like Us, Fearless Like Us, and Infamous Like Us, which follow Banks and Akara and Sully. If you have stuck around through this obnoxiously long video, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Just say anything, say hi, tell me what you're reading, and I will see you next year.